Hey everyone, this is Steve from GamersNexus.net, and today we are looking at something I completely pulled apart. This is was a GTX 750 Zone by Zotac. This is a new passively cooled GTX 750. It is the 750 as we know it from NVIDIA, with the GM107 Maxwell chip on the board, as you can see right here where the thermal paste sort of was. And this is the cooler. There's no fan, so it is a passive cooler. And we took it apart, looked at how it's built, benchmark the thermals, benchmark the FPS, and that's what I've got for you here today. So in terms of how this is built, it's pretty much like every other heatsink for an actively cooled GPU, except it's got no fan. So you have your copper cold plate right here. The copper cold plate, of course, has thermal interface, or TIM, or thermal compound, or thermal paste between it and the GPU, which is on this board right here. And the GPU is the part that really generates heat, so you put some thermal compound on there, and that ensures that there's smooth contact between the copper cold plate, which is a 400 watts per meter Kelvin thermal conductivity rating, and the GPU. And if you don't have that, there are small imperfections in the surface of the cold plate that will catch and hold air. And air is a lot hotter than thermal paste, which is about 7 watts per meter Kelvin. Air is like not even 1. So you want that interface in there, otherwise you trap and generate heat in the form of air. The cold plate ducts all the heat away from the GPU. It then goes into the heat pipes, which I've explained this in depth in the past and in the article linked to the description below if you're interested, but we'll go over it briefly here. Heat pipes have a sort of liquid in them that goes through a phase change when heated up, and that's where you lose a lot of your energy in the form of heat. And that liquid, when it phase changes, goes using capillary action down the heat pipe, eventually hits the tip, condenses back into a liquid, and travels back to the cold plate area. It doesn't actually go into the cold plate, but it goes to the cold plate area and then turns back into a gas once heated up again. And as the heat pipe gets hotter, your air, normally from a fan, but not in this case, your air will blow through these aluminum fins and duct the heat away from the fins, which are ducting the heat away from the heat pipe. So basically it's GPU generates heat, cold plate steals the heat, heat pipes steal that heat, it travels down them, the aluminum fins duct away from those heat pipes, and then air blows through the fins and pulls away from the heat pipes so that they can cool down the liquid and reuse it for another pass. In this case, we're relying on air from the case because there is no fan. So you do need some form of cooling in your case in order to use this. This video card is really dedicated for use at the home theater market. So if you're a home theater PC gamer, if you're trying to build a dead silent, and I mean that because this makes zero noise, if you're trying to build a dead silent home theater PC for gaming in the living room, that type of thing, then this is kind of where you want to be headed in terms of passive devices. If you don't need the dead silence, then you could probably get a slightly better GPU, but we'll talk about that in a moment. In terms of thermal performance, let's see what we have here. I benchmarked this with just a couple flagship cards and one other NVIDIA card that was closer to the range. So we've got the 750 passive GPU running FurMark at 100% load, cooled at 29.8 Celsius when under full load adjusted for ambient. That is actually very good. That's pretty cool considering there's no fan. And for reference, we look at the 750 Ti on auto settings, which is the most realistic, and that was at 32.2 Celsius. 29 Celsius, 30 Celsius is not bad at all because your CPU is probably going to be around that anyway, if not a little higher. So, and that's really all that matters. You want the GPU to not be generating so much heat that it's warming up all the surrounding components. So that's pretty good performance. Just for reference, the 750 Ti at 100% load was 24.7 Celsius. The 250X on auto, which is a comparably priced card, was 47.2 Celsius, quite a lot hotter, and it has active cooling on it, but that's AMD's architecture, they run a little bit hotter. Moving on to FPS, I tested this in several games. You can see all of them in the links in the description below, but we'll just go through a few here really quickly. In this case, the 750 passive cards limit was about 27 FPS when on very high with Metro Last Light, which is really good actually. That means you could probably play the game on a mix of low and medium settings at around 60 FPS. That's what I define as playable. That's what the site defines as playable, is 60 FPS. So you'd have to be low or medium for Metro, which isn't amazing, but really not bad for 750. Looking at Grid Autosport, which is one of the best optimized games I've ever tested, Grid Autosport, the 750 passive card, operates at almost 40 FPS average on maximum settings. So if you drop down to high settings, it's suddenly pushing nearly 80 FPS. That is more than playable. You could actually adjust some of those settings back to ultra, and you'd have a really good looking experience with a fairly high performance card. You'd be at 60 FPS, which is all you need in this type of game. And that's not bad for 120 bucks and zero noise. Now, I do want to point out the 750 Ti is significantly better value across the board in terms of performance. It's always going to be better value than a passively cooled 750 because when you introduce passive cooling, it's suddenly more expensive. So the 750 is 120 bucks passively cooled, and the 750 Ti is like 130, 140 for 2 gigabytes of RAM, so it's got twice as much, actively cooled, so it is going to make some noise, which is where your detriment is, but a lot more performance at nearly 100 FPS on high settings, which means you can run it on max all day long. Looking at Battlefield 4 Ultra, the 750 passive card struggled at 31 FPS when on ultra settings and had slight gains to almost 40 FPS when on high settings. Battlefield is another one you'd be playing on probably medium settings with a few low settings in there, maybe a medium with no AA. You'd probably be at about 60 FPS, which is definitely playable. So not horrible, but not amazing performance there. So all in all, the GTX 750 by Zotac performs pretty well in most games. I was impressed by it. The thermal performance is actually very impressive. The value is there if you want a completely silent system. If you don't care that your fan makes some noise in the background, or if you have a way to stifle that, maybe with a case or with other cooling solutions that are aftermarket like liquid, then you probably want to be looking towards a better card. The 750 Ti is within budget and very high performing comparatively, and I mean it's actively cooled, but it does well on games, and it's cheap. It's less than $150 all day long for 2 gigabytes. The 750 is 120, 1 gigabyte, which is plenty for home theater use. I don't want you to focus on that number too much. 1 gigabyte will get you by just fine for home theater PC gaming because you're limited more by the GPU than the RAM at that point. So other than that, the 250X isn't even really worth considering unless it has some features or optimization in a specific game. It is $100, so I guess it's a bit cheaper if you're on a super tight budget, but the 750 at that point is also worth looking at, which is around the same price when not passive. So that's sort of what you need to think about. Just to give you a very clear conclusion here, with a home theater PC that you want to make no noise and be in your living room, this is a very good card. With a gaming PC that can make some noise, the 750 Ti is within budget and is a bit better. I would recommend that. So that's sort of where you need to draw the line and figure out what's best for your needs. Very impressive thermal performance, fairly impressive gaming performance, and that's all. I will see you all next time. Peace.